Hello, everyone. It is 11:30 Central, so we will get started. Thank you for tuning in to today's presentation, Entrepreneurship and STEM Using Business to Build Authentic Project-Based Learning. My name is Kelsey, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. First, here is your 30-second introduction to Realityworks for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We are an employee-owned company based in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, that creates experiential learning tools for teaching job and life skills. We got our start over 20 years ago when former NASA engineer Rick Germain created the first RealCare baby infant simulator and then went on to found the company that is now Realityworks. Today, our training tools combine curriculum with hands-on learning tools, student activities, and assessments. Baby is still around, but now you can look to us for our tools like bovine birthing and ultrasound simulator, virtual welding simulator, wearable geriatric sensitivity suits, and if you have some time, we encourage you to check it out and see it all. Presenting today, we have Todd Hunter, who is the STEM and Career Exploration Product Manager here at Realityworks. Todd is an experienced educator in leading innovative curriculum design, and he has over 19 years of experience as a STEM teacher and program developer in Minnesota. Before we get started, I want to cover a couple things. First, today's presentation has been pre-recorded, and all attendees will receive a link containing the recording, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint slides and free resources. For those of you attending live today, you will also receive a certificate of completion for attending today's presentation. Keep an eye on your email. You will also receive that email within 24 hours after the presentation, and we will have time at the end for Q&A, so feel free to type your questions in the chat or Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Todd.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the introduction there, Kelsey. Yeah, my name is Todd Hunter. I was a high school teacher for 20 years before joining Realityworks, and now I'm responsible for helping to build our STEM and trades or career exploration products and really those learning experiences. Today, our webinar is all about, let me switch the screen here, there we go, how we can, in the world of CTE, right, bring entrepreneurship, right, that business lens into our learning experiences in our schools, whether we're a teacher or we are an administrator or somebody who's coaching and supporting teachers, right? Bringing business practice into our classroom is an incredibly effective way of increasing engagement. So my goal is by the end of this short webinar, you guys have some ideas, but also some resources, and then some actual actionable things that you can take into a classroom and use to engage your students. Now, why would you want to do this? So this is kind of like me speaking to my higher level administrators and district support staff. What's the value, right? Because everything comes with a trade-off in education, right? You only have X amount of time. So are you, if you try to bring in project-based learning and integrating business and entrepreneurship, what's the cost? But more importantly, right, what's the benefit? Okay, and these are great talking points when you guys are writing curriculum documents or having a conversation about why you want to change things up and bring some of these ideas into your class, right? Everything here from my own personal experience, but then also working with teachers across the country, right? This is what we hear as the positives, the benefits of tying entrepreneurship and business practices into our classes. And I think the biggest one for me, right, is, I'm going to jump ahead, it's just for students, is answering that question that we always deal with. Why do we have to learn this? And, you know, when you put the dollar sign out there, you kind of solve that question. And students don't really push against, like, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do this? Right? By putting, right, our learning, whatever content it is, into the frame of business practice and entrepreneurship, students really understand. And when we work with teachers who have done this, right, they find that those students who are oftentimes disengaged really buy in because they feel like, okay, I am developing, I'm going to go back, all of these skills and abilities that are not tied to content, right? But they're tied to everything else that's going to help me be successful, right? So much of what determines a student's success after school is not going to be found in the textbook or in a multiple choice quiz, right? It's all of these other big picture skills and abilities that we want to give our students exposure to so that they are ready to be successful no matter what path they take. Right. So what my goal is specifically, we're going to jump through sort of 5 different strategies, and each of them I've got examples, but then also some like how do I actually implement this in my classroom, right? For each of these 5. So let's start with we're going to start with that role playing service call. As we go here, I don't want to just have this all be conceptual. So we are going to look at, okay, if I want to do this strategy for bringing business into my classroom, how do I actually do that? And so we've connected these different strategies with different products that are really, really great fits for each of these business and entrepreneurship sort of contexts. So let's start with the electrical wiring kit, right? This one is like CTE teachers, whether it's construction, introduction to trades, right? Electrical wiring, residential electrical wiring, commercial, right? Love this because it's a nice tabletop version, and you can do everything, all of the learning without connecting up to legit wall power, which keeps OSHA really happy. Also, just as a note, in this slideshow, you guys can see that QR code down there at the bottom, right? If you want, while you're listening, you can grab your phone, you can scan that, and that'll take you right to our website. So you can kind of like I'm a multitasker. I like to do multiple things at once. You can scan it on the website while you're watching this webinar at the same time. Now, the reason that I bring this product up is that it's a great, great example, which is a way to integrate, right, this idea of a technician service call with a learning experience in the classroom, right? So the context behind this is, right, let's say, hey, students, you want to be maybe an electrician in the future or whatever, some sort of service provider, which is a great, like future career. What does it actually look like? It's so much more than just knowing about how electricity works and how to do the actual wiring. And students love, right? They really do. They might have grown about it at first, but they really do love these role play scenarios. And so when I've done this, I actually, right, had students working in groups, right, and they'd have different roles. So you might have a homeowner, right, and then you'd have 2 technicians, and I would send the technicians out of the room, right, and I tell the homeowners, all right, guys, here's what we're gonna do, right? You are gonna switch up your electrical wall unit for this problem. You do this, you do this, you do this. Once all the units are set, then I have those technicians come in, right? And that's where the role playing starts. So the homeowner is kind of the one driving the scenario, and that's where I give them this script. Right? And then as the technician, the electrician in this case, is working through trying to troubleshoot and problem solve, they're also not just being the I'm an electrician, right? But they are being a small business owner. So as they're working through the wall units, trying to figure out what the problem is, and then after they diagnose it, let's actually fix it, right? The homeowner is on a rubric, right, that I've provided here as an example, a clipboard, sheet of paper, or whatever, is scoring, right, sort of the bigger picture. What does it mean to be a professional, right? And you always have to give the context of like, hey guys, we're going to take turns. So today you're the homeowner, tomorrow you're going to be the technician. So let's be honest, let's be truthful, and let's be really helpful as we're filling out this rubric for each other. But it's a great way to get everybody engaged, and then also just to have that conversation about, being an electrician is so much more than just knowing how to fix the problem. Next, I wanted to talk about the trailer circuit stem kit. This is really similar to the electrical wall panel, except much more, much more technical, right? What we did is we condensed a whole car or truck and trailer unit into one so that students have to wire, right, every single light, the brakes, the power brakes to the rear, the running lights, like it matches exactly a seven-way, like a pretty fancy trailer. I mean, you could do a simple four-way, but also all the way up, to a seven-way as shown there. And then they have to troubleshoot. So if you look in this right here, right, scenario, and this has nothing to do with like, bringing business and entrepreneurship. This is just part of the learning experience of the trailer circuit STEM kit is once they learn how to wire and use the multimeter and test and diagnose, then they have to troubleshoot through 10 different scenarios where things are going wrong. There's also really cool, I just want to point this out because I love this thing, is that it has a working fuse panel. You can actually measure 12 volts on these fuses. They're not real fuses, they're simulated fuses. But this whole thing, right, acts and behaves just like a real 12-volt car system, except it's incredibly safe. So it's battery powered, 3 AAA batteries, or sorry, AA batteries, maybe 4. But you can't short it out. You can't blow out any fuses. You can't short circuit it, right? It is incredibly safe to use, and you can set it up on a tabletop really easy. But a great way to apply this is kind of the same as the technician service call, is that electronics repair service. You could do this totally from the context of an automotive scenario, like somebody brought in their truck and their trailer to the auto store and said, hey, this isn't working, can you diagnose this? I like to think of this as a entryway into robotics and engineering and sort of more technical circuits also, right? Especially with consumer electronics getting more and more expensive. A lot of people are looking at, hey, can I repair this instead of just replacing it? And so what does it look like to be, right, the electronics repair person? Somebody comes in, brings you a thing that isn't working. And so just like the technician and homeowner with the electrical role playing, this one is very similar, right? You have somebody who has this product, it's not working, they bring it in. Now what's interesting is I switched the script, right, a little bit so that it's the technician, right, who is driving the interaction a lot more. And then again, here's a rubric. So what is that customer doing? As the person, the technician, is diagnosing, right, what's going on with the trailer circuit STEM kit, trying to figure out what the problem is, and then thinking about how to fix it, and then actually fixing it. Right? That customer is evaluating them just like they did before. Next, measurements. Right, the bane of all teachers in science and engineering and trades. Right? Measurement is such a fundamental piece of everything, yet students hate to do it, they hate to learn about it, and yet it is so important. To meet that need and sort of the importance of how like measurement is just so foundational, we created the Measurement Maps Training Kit, which unites, right, taking precise measurements, right, with real tools, and then, right, what do you do with those measurements? So we work quite a bit of math into this. And that product is wonderful. Teachers love it. It's a great way to do the start of a quarter or a semester, just to kind of figure out where all your students are and their abilities. But what I really like about it is that it sets them up to think, right, how does math fit into this world that I'm in? And no matter what class you're teaching in CTE, right, whether it's construction, framing, plumbing, HVAC, or even, like our engineering classes where you're actually like starting to build things. This idea that materials cost money, one, is good for students to know, right? Just from the point of view of the teacher, because you don't want them wasting materials. God, the amount of time I spent explaining to students how much that sheet of material cost and why you can't just cut a square out the very center, right? But anytime we can work into our learning experience, right, a real world sort of check, like how much does this cost, is great. And that's where this materials costing exercise is a great sort of next step with that measurement math training kit, right? And this worksheet that I've got posted here is just an example. A lot of our CTE teachers working in the trades and construction, right? They build structures, whether it's a small shed, a doghouse, or even a large garage. Or we have some schools who are doing whole houses, right? But if you have a structure that already exists, right, this materials costing exercise is a great way to sort of get students to, one, use their math skills, right? And two, sort of start to understand, like, the big picture. What does it take to one, right, pay for something, but two, just how much material goes into a project. That's a huge leap in understanding for students, right? To walk into your home improvement store or to your lumber yard and to know what you want and what you need and how much that's going to cost, that's a fundamentally important real world skill for anybody who's looking at, especially entering into the trades. So this materials costing exercise is a much smaller scale, right? It's not really a role player scenario, right? Something they can do in teams. Print this off. The way I've seen it executed is, the school near me that I work with quite a bit, they have a garage that they use, right? They go into that garage. It's got all open framing on the interior, and they will do this cost estimation exercise, right? At using that pre-built garage that's already there. And then what's really fascinating is to see how if you have 5 or 6 or 8 groups of students all doing this, they all come up with different total pieces and total material costs. And so then that's a great time for the teacher to have some discussions about, okay, why did you guys say that we need 48 2x4s and you guys said only 40, right? What was your reason? What's your logic? Let's talk about waste. Let's talk about efficiency. Is it more efficient to buy 10% extra, right? So that you have everything you need? Or is it better to save money? Does that cost you time? Right? So this is a great activity to engage, activate those math skills, and see how those math skills result in real sort of getting you ready for business experiences. Now, the other one I want to talk about is with our GuideWELD VR. Right? Welding is such a fundamental skill that so many of our schools and our teachers want students to experience. Now, more and more, less of our students, when they get to us, whether it's in that trades exploration class or our first metals class, they've never welded before. And so we are their first experience with welding. And that's where GuideWELD VR really shines. It's before the students head into the booth, right? It gives them that in-booth experience, right? In a way that's, well, one, really easy to demo, two, really easy to see because you can put it up on the big screen if you, the teacher, want to show, right? And it's just three, is like not as scary, right? You don't have the sparks, the heat, they don't have to put on all the stuff. They can work on it in small teams. They get immediate feedback. It's kind of like having a second teacher. But one of the things that I really like about GuideWELD VR is that it sets up the student for, again, understanding how much everything costs, right? And so when you learn, right, you kind of learn to weld, you do the different welds, the T, the butt, the lap, right? What's really cool is in the learning experience in GuideWELD VR, we work in there materials costs. So you can see every time you do a weld, how much money are you spending using this material? And that then lets you, right, start as a student thinking about, okay, how does money fit into this, right? But now, just like with, doing the materials costing estimation worksheet in a garage or a shed, now, right, as you start to understand metal, right, and fabrication, now you can start looking at, right, other objects, whether it's a bicycle, whether it's, the ceiling, the framing in a big open shop, right? And start thinking about, okay, just how much does this cost? If I was going to have a truck show up with the delivery, right, so that I could build this thing. One, what would I put on that order, right? How do I communicate the length of those pieces and how many I need? And then how much is that all going to cost, right? Incredibly real world, and that's a skill students need to have, right? Next, right, we have materials, but labor is incredibly important, right? Or there's like cost of labor, I should say, sorry. Having worked construction in the past in a small business and working with a lot of other small construction outfits, this was one of the biggest challenges that a lot of my peers struggle with is how much do I estimate labor and what am I worth? What do I charge to make ends meet? Right. And for students, I mean, if you've been teaching for a while, you know that students have no clue about how much it costs to do things. Right. So thinking about how we are preparing them to enter into the business world and building that conception of how much, right, how much time does something take and how do I quantify, how do I think about that time, right? Super relevant. So this labor cost estimation exercise is great in that one, you can do it after a project, right? They can reflect back, which is sometimes a good way to kind of get the ball rolling. Or two, at the beginning of a project. And I've seen this done with teams. You've introduced this challenge, this build that a team of students has to do. Right? And then as part of that introduction and their planning, they have to come up with a labor cost estimation. And what's really valuable is thinking about this column, right? The type of work, aka who is going to do what, right? And what is your worth in that role, right? And this is also really fun, like looking up what the local wage is per hour, whether it's the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, or connecting with local businesses and kind of getting a sense of what they charge or what they pay their laborers really helps drive home the real world application of the work that they're doing in the classroom. Okay, and then this is sort of like the culmination, right? And when we think about the act of, or the practice of, I'm going to become a contractor, it doesn't matter what your specialty is, whether you're a general or you're a carpenter or a framer, plumber, HVAC, whatever, right? Being able to go into a place and submit a job bid is huge, right? I have, let's see, a good friend of mine who he's a general contractor. He says he averages only about 25% of his bids are actually accepted. And it's so important that that bid is accurate, right? So that you are making enough money yourself, but also is competitive, right? But then, right, that bid is also important as far as, laying out a professional set of expectations, right, in that customer business relationship that you're trying to establish here. So I've seen this, let me see what the next slide is, used as a great sort of a end or whole capstone project for an upper level trades class. And this is a great rubric. The last page there, this is just sort of a generic, outline. What it really comes down to then is you can take those different parts that we've done, labor costing, material costing, right? And understanding, how service works, right? And tie it all into this job bid. And then this is a great rubric for the teacher to use to evaluate, provide feedback, but more importantly, right, giving this to the student helps them understand sort of where the bar is, right, to do a really great job in that example job bid. Right? So all of these, or not always, most of these that I've shown you, I did upload into a Google Drive folder. So if you'd like, you can access them right there. And I just want to throw this out there for you right now for schools who are looking at building out their welding metals program. We do have a really fantastic offer right now buy 3 GuideWELDs, get one free. So scan that QR code if you're interested. And then lastly, if there's anything I can do to help you, please reach out to me. My email is right there. More than happy to answer questions or just whatever. Let's have a conversation. If you are interested in any of those products that we brought up today or want to talk to somebody from Realityworks, if you scan this QR code, that's probably the most efficient way for us to get in contact with you. We're always looking forward to connecting with teachers and educators who are looking to bring high engagement learning experiences to their classroom. Thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.